All right, so now we're going to talk about energy flow in ecosystems, and we talked about ecosystems before this. And remember, that's just kind of like the biotic, which is the living part, and the abiotic, the non-living part, living together in an area, right? And here you kind of see an example of an ecosystem. You have the biotic part, which is the trees and the it looks like a fox or maybe a coyote and a squirrel, and then you see the insects in the soil. So those are the biotic parts. Then you have the abiotic part, which is kind of like the rain and the soil and the water there. All of these things are the abiotic, right? So this is an ecosystem here. What we're going to be talking about now is how energy flows through an ecosystem. And we talk about energy, all energy is anything that lets something do work, right? So like if you have no energy, you really can't do anything, right? You need energy and be able to do some kind of work. Your car, it can't do any kind of work, it can't move forward unless it has some kind of energy, right? And that is the fuel that you put in the car. Or if it's electric, then the energy is electric, right? So when we talk about energy, those are things like heat is energy, light is energy, electricity is energy. So those things are considered energy. But what we need to understand is that all of the energy we have on the earth, it all comes from the sun, right? And it just changes from one thing to another. And so, right here, you see this picture. The sun energy, it creates sugars in the plants, right, in the leaves and the fruits and vegetables of the plants. And then those plants, are leaves or grass, get eaten by the animals, and then other things eat those animals. So we'll talk about that in detail. But that's kind of what we're going to be talking about. This is like a good overview picture of that. All right. So once the sunlight hits, the first thing that can produce something like some kind of energy out of that is called a producer, right? And a producer, as you can see right here, like it says above, all organisms play a role in their ecosystem. So, in one of the first guys that makes this energy are called autotrophs, right? And autotrophs are also called producers. And to produce something just means that you make something, right? So these autotrophs, the word auto right here, and let me just kind of get this marker thing right here. So the word auto right here, this first part, auto means kind of like self, right? So if you have like an automated dishwasher, that means that the dishes wash themselves, right, in that machine. And then over here, you have the word troph, right? Autotroph. And so the word troph here kind of has to do with like food, right? So basically, autotroph means that it makes its own food. And that's what happens. These guys make their own food, usually through photosynthesis. And in photosynthesis, what that means, there's a lot of vocabulary having to do with biology. So it's always good if you kind of know what the words mean. Like photo means light, and then synthesis means to make something, right? So photosynthesis is making food with sunlight. And so that's a cool thing about autotrophs is that they use the sunlight to make food. That'd be really cool if we could do that, right? Just kind of put your arms out, soak up the sun, and then feed yourself that way. But, then we'd be green because usually it's green things that do photosynthesis. And so examples here are plants, and these kind of look like bluebonnets. I'm not sure, but anyways, anything that photosynthesizes is an autotroph. And again, that's a producer. That's like the first thing that makes that food from the sunlight, right? Turns it from light energy into chemical energy, and the sugars inside of those plants and the fruits and vegetables, those are chemicals, right? So we don't usually think about it like that, but an apple is kind of like a little battery, and you eat that apple and then you get the energy from that apple. So that's a cool thing about autotrophs. So again, all organisms are going to play that role in their ecosystem. We also have consumers, and consumers are heterotrophs, right? So heterotroph kind of means like different, and troph again kind of means food. So they can't make the food themselves. They have to get that from a different source, right? So these heterotrophs, they get their energy from eating other organisms, and we can be considered we are considered heterotrophs, right? But here you have herbivores. An herbivore is just something that eats plants, right? So you can see that caterpillar there in that first picture right here. This is a caterpillar and it is an herbivore. Right then over here you have the carnivore. Carnivore, it just eats animals, right? So these carnivores, they have to eat animals in order to survive. And they're getting their sugars, they're getting their energy from the sugars that those other animals eat, right? So if they just eat cows, those cows got their sugar from the grass, which were the producers. So you can see right here, it's kind of making like what you would call a chain, right? You start with the sunlight, then you go with the producers, and the producers make food. But then you see these right here, these herbivores, they eat those producers. And then those carnivores right here, they eat the herbivores. And then these omnivores right here, you can see they eat plants and animals. So these omnivores eat everything basically, right? And then you have a specific kind of omnivore that's called a scavenger. A scavenger is one that eats dead animals. And so that could be like a vulture or a coyote or a hyena. And so these are very important for the environment. You're going to see, like it says on the top, everyone plays a role in their environment. And so, it's all, if you've ever seen like the movie The Lion King, it's kind of cheesy, but like the circle of life, right? It starts with the producers and then it works its way up. Right. And we are examples of omnivores. Although I guess some people will mostly only eat meat and other ones mostly eat just plants. But in general, humans are omnivores. And so here, this is another important role in the ecosystem. We have decomposers, right? And decomposers are very important because they break down waste and dead organisms to return raw materials to the environment. So they're the recyclers, right? They're the ones that recycle, and these do a lot of good things for the environment. Like you can see some examples right here are bacteria, fungi, and worms. And especially like the worms, right? It's a very good sign if you have a garden and you have these earthworms in your garden because it means they're breaking down all of those dead leaves and all of those dead grass and all of that stuff, and it's turning it into the food that plants need to grow, right? Into the nutrients that plants need. And whenever you hear that word nutrients, it's kind of just like uh, the things that something needs to survive to live. Right. And so decomposers, without them, we probably wouldn't be here because we'd have so many diseases and things like that from all of those dead things just piling up. But these guys are able to break those down. And so, yeah, this is what I'm talking about, right? A world with no decomposers. And what they're trying to do now in some places or what they are doing is using like bacteria that can decompose plastic and things like that. So, because plastic, y'all, is one of the worst things that humans have created, and we still use it and they still make it, but it never goes away. It just, if you've ever been to some beaches, like all you see is plastic bottles just lining the side of the beach on the sand everywhere. And some places it's really bad, right? And so not a lot of things that we have can decompose plastic. And so that's why you see plastic, especially in this picture, everything that's there is pretty much plastic and it's all piling up. Right. So without decomposers, and again, they're trying to find some things that decompose plastic, but for now, most other things are able to be decomposed by the things that you saw right here, like bacteria, fungi, and worms. Right. So decomposers are very important. So for this right here, is this a producer or a consumer? And remember, y'all, you got to remember producer is an autotroph. Auto means self, troph means food, so it makes its own food. Can deer make, or yeah, I guess this is a deer, maybe an elk. I don't really know the difference. I guess elk are bigger. But, anyways, is this guy right here a producer or consumer? And again, does it make its own food? Is it an autotroph or producer? Or does it have to eat something else? Heterotroph, a consumer. Right. This one here is a consumer. It's an herbivore, right? It has to eat grass in order to survive. So this guy is a consumer. Grass and leaves, green stuff, right? So producer or a consumer. And again, autotroph is a producer and consumer is heterotroph. And so these guys right here, uh, because you see those green leaves, right? Those green leaves are showing you that this is doing photosynthesis, which means that it is making its own food, right? Autotroph. It is like self feeding itself. And so, yeah, this one is a producer. So here we have producer or consumer. So is a bear, first of all, is it green? No, bears aren't green, none that I know of. And so, that's kind of a good sign that it is not a producer. But other than that, most people, you should realize by now that bears do eat meat, right? They eat meat. That's something that most people, have kind of learned in their lives. But something a lot of people don't know is that they do eat a lot of berries and a lot of different green things, right, in the forest. So again, we think of most them mostly as like meat eaters, but they are also they're eating vegetables, sorry, fruits and things like that. And so, yeah, these guys are consumers. They are heterotrophs, producer or consumer. So this guy, it looks like a bobcat, and so the bobcat, uh, most cats are very, like, very good predators. So, like, right there, right off the bat, you should know something that is a predator means that, it's hunting, and so it is eating meat. And so this one is a consumer, it's a carnivore. Right? So cats are very well known for just eating meat, right? And yeah, they will kill anything in sight. They are very good hunters, predators. And so here we actually have two for one, right? So here you see there is something that is green in the background, but then the thing inside of that is not, right? So here you have a Venus flytrap. That's a plant. But this plant right here, inside its, if you want to call it, well, it's inside its leaves, right? It kind of looks like its mouth. Inside of that, it has a fly, and that fly is decomposing. It's getting broken down inside of the fly trap. So it gets stuck in there, and then it just slowly gets broken down, and then the plant, the Venus flytrap, actually gets to uh, basically suck out the juices that are coming out from that fly, right? But the Venus flytrap is green too, so it is also a producer. The fly is a consumer, and flies, what they do, I don't know if you've ever seen a close-up of what a fly does, but for it to eat, it has to kind of spit something out on whatever it lands on, and then it sucks it back up in its mouth. And so when a fly lands on you, it's basically eating your sweat and the little dead skin cells and all of those things on your skin. And when it lands on your food, it's doing the same thing. And when it lands on a piece of feces, it also does the same thing. So flies are consumers, but in this case, the Venus flytrap is also a carnivorous, right? So it's basically eating the meat, not even the meat, I guess, just the nutrients that come from the flesh of the fly. So yeah, kind of interesting example there. And so energy enters an ecosystem as sunlight, right? That's where it comes from. That's why I was saying, like, there's this thing called the law of thermodynamics. And the law of thermodynamics says that energy can neither be created nor destroyed. It's just changed from one form to another. And that's what happens. Like, through here, all the energy we get on the planet comes from the sun, and we just change it from one form to another, right? We saw it goes from light into like chemical energy in the apple or the grass or the leaves. And then another plant eats those apples or leaves or grass. And then something comes and eats that animal that was eating the grass, and so on, right? But the energy just keeps going from one thing to the other to the other, right? But it starts with the sun. And so here you have a food chain. A food chain, it just shows, just think of a chain, right? And here you have a picture of a chain on the right here. And this is what a chain is. These are links, right? Chain links. And so these chain links right here, it just means that they're connected to each other, right? So these are connected. And so a food chain shows one path of the flow of energy in an ecosystem. And so right here, this is what it's saying is that, that it starts with the sunlight, and then it goes into the producers, and then into the consumers, and so on, right? So the order of the chain is like you see right here. The first energy source is the sun, right? That is where the energy starts, is the sun. And then after that, you have the producer. And then the producer again is going to be the green thing, right? The thing that's photosynthesizing. And then after that, you have your first level, which is your primary consumer, right? A consumer is just something that's going to eat a producer. All right. So you got to remember what the words mean, right? So uh consumer is eating a producer, and the producer is a green thing, right? So basically it's something that is eating grass or eating fruits or eating leaves, that kind of thing. Right? Then you get to the second level consumer. So this consumer eats the first level consumer, right? It's eating basically think about the producer as grass, right? And then you have the consumer, and it comes and eats the first level consumer. So it's eating the thing that is eating the grass, so the squirrel, right? So and we'll see a picture right now. It's kind of confusing. We'll see a picture in a little bit. And then the decomposer, it just recycles the material for use by producers, right? So basically, if you think of something that dies, you have these decomposers. They break it down. The thing that dies is made up of different elements, right? Like carbon and nitrogen and all of these different things, hydrogen. But the soil also needs those things. Like if a plant is growing, you want to give it a lot of nitrogen to make it grow. If it's like in the green stage, like if it's a flower and it's barely growing for the first time, if you give it nitrogen, it's going to grow really fast, right? And so what these decomposers do is they break down those dead things into nitrogen, and then that plant has that nitrogen to help it grow, right? So that's why you can see it says here, recycles material for use by producers, because it breaks down those dead things, and then it turns it into the nutrients that plants need, that producers need to grow. Right, and here you kind of see this, what I was talking about. So it was a little confusing just looking at the words. Now you kind of have like a visual image of that, right? So here you see the grass, sorry, is a producer, right? It's making food out of the sunlight. It's photosynthesizing. And so then this mouse right here is this first level consumer, right? So here you see again the producer, the sun, the producer, the first level primary consumer, and that's the mouse right here, right? This mouse is a first level consumer. It's eating the producer, right? It's eating the grass. And then next you see right here, let me go back so you can see this second level consumer. It's eating the first level consumer, right? So the second level consumer is this. It looks like it's called a kestrel, but I think it may be a kind of hawk. If you ever see a bird that hunts like these, they're known as raptors, right? Raptors are called birds of prey, but this one specifically is called a kestrel. But what you see right here is that it comes down and it's going to eat the first level consumer, the mouse, right? So these are all of the things you see right here: the sun, and you see the sun right here, and then the next one, whoops, went too far. And then next you have the producer, and then right here you see the grass is a producer right here. Right. And then after that, the next one is the first level primary consumer right here. And then right here, the first level is a primary consumer. Right. Then next, you see the second level consumer right here. Then right here, you see the second level consumer right there. What they're not showing you is the decomposers. The decomposers, again, are going to be like in the soil. It's going to be fungus, bacteria, worms. So those would actually be in the soil area, right? So we can't really see them right now. And so the food chain, this is just a little bit more about the food chain. It just describes a feeding relationship between a producer, which we saw already, and a single chain of consumers in an ecosystem. And the arrow indicates energy flow, right? So the arrow is showing you right here which way the energy is going, right? So the energy is going this way right here. And so what this is saying, again, this is a producer, right? It made its food from the sunlight, right? Through photosynthesis, and it's green out here, right? You can see the green parts right here. And then over here, this is the sugars that it made through the sunlight, right? And then we eat those. And it's kind of plants have evolved this, y'all, like fruits and vegetables, so that they can help spread their seeds around. Right. Because whenever we as humans or animals, we eat something and we usually pass its seeds along, and then that plant or whatever the seeds are from, that plant will grow there, right? So it's a pretty cool thing that plants do. And then an example of that is corn, right? So imagine us like planting all these kernel or all these fields of corn because we need the corn, right? But also we pass their seeds along. But anyways, that is a producer right here. And then you see the next thing, you have the primary consumer is the locust because it's eating the producer, right? And then here you have secondary consumer, and the secondary consumer here is a lizard because the lizard eats the locust. All right, and so something new that they're adding though that we haven't seen before is this tertiary consumer. Tertiary, y'all, what tertiary basically means is, and let me put it right here, it basically means like the third, right? The third type of thing that happens. And so you have right here, primary is the first, secondary right here, and let me put it right next to. Again, primary is first. Secondary right here is just second. Let me move it right here. And then tertiary over here, that just means third. Let me put it there. Right. So this is all this means right here. And the arrows indicate which way the energy is going. The thing that really is like unfortunate about this is how much energy gets lost from one to the next, from like the producer to the primary consumer to the secondary to the tertiary. So much energy is lost from each one, from one to the next. And we'll see that in a few slides. So that was a food chain, right? You saw the chain up here, the chain link, it's all connected this way. A food web is kind of more like this. It's a diagram that shows the energy flow through different organisms in an ecosystem, right? So it's not just a single line going from one to the next. These are connected, and like it says here, consists of many overlapping food chains, right? So you're going to see there's a little bit more confusing than a food chain, but it's a little bit more accurate of what's going on, right? So here you see kind of similar, but it looks a little bit more complicated, right? Because it's not just a chain, it's not just a straight line. Now it's a web. So it looks a little bit more complicated. But if you see right here, producers form the base. Again, we know this, right? That these are the green things, the photosynthesizing things, and they make their food through sunlight, right? But these blue arrows show the movement of energy from the producers, from the grasses and the leaves and that, to the first level consumers, right? So here you see the first level consumers, and y'all remember first level consumers are just the things that eat green stuff, right? So here you have rabbit, a mouse, a grasshopper, and these guys right here are, eating the producers. Right, then you see right here the yellow arrows, number three. They show energy moving from the first level consumers to the secondary level consumers. Right. So remember, the second level consumers, they can be carnivores like the shrew. So this shrew right here eats meat, or they can be omnivores like the mouse. Right. So the mouse will eat insects and meat and things like that, but it will also eat seeds and grasses and things like that. Right. So right here again, you see the tertiary. Remember the third one, I'm sorry, these are the second level consumers. And right here, you can see when we went back to this, it's the third level consumer. So sorry, I'm kind of getting ahead of myself. And then over here, the fourth, the red arrow showing energy moving to the second level, from the second level consumers to the third. So y'all, basically, again, this is just showing you that it's going from producers and then to the primary consumer, the secondary, and then the tertiary. But the thing is that they're overlapping, right? So it's not one straight line. It's like all of them are living together in an ecosystem. And so then after that, you have the decomposers. And again, those are just kind of the ones that break down things that have died, and they break them down back into things that the producers can use, right? The nutrients that plants use. And so, food webs in the sagebrush steppe ecosystem. This is just from a specific place where you see that. Let me kind of close this down a little bit. They're right here. The primary consumers are just the things that, again, use the sun to make food. And in this case, we hadn't really seen cactus before, but here you have cactus, right? And then the primary consumers are just going to be the squirrels and other rodents like the mice. And then you have insects and then pronghorn and other grazers. So those guys are the primary. And then the small predators, carnivores like the badger, the snake, the lizard, the bat, those will eat the primary consumers. And then finally, you have like the larger ones. And this one over here would be like the tertiary. All right. So over here, you would put the tertiary. And again, remember that that one just means the third level of consumers, basically, right? Primary consumers, secondary consumers, tertiary consumers. All right. Let me just delete that. And so, And so here we only really went up into the tertiary level, right? But what you're going to see here is there can actually be like another level, right? A quaternary. And quaternary just means fourth, right? Remember, tertiary is like third, secondary is second, primary is first, and then you have the producers, right? So if we wanted to, we could have put another thing up here. Probably humans would go up here, right, for the fourth level quaternary because we pretty much eat everything. But for the most part, we only went up to the third level of consumers right here, primary being these guys, secondary being these, tertiary being these right here, and then again, probably humans could go up here. And so, consumer labeling, right? So, right here in this one, it's just asking you to be able to label which are the consumers. All right, so create a food web that contains the following organisms: bobcat, grasshopper, lizard, owl, squirrel, spider, acorns. For each level, identify it as a first, second, or third level. All right, so now let's talk about feeding relationships. So, when we're talking about feeding relationships, it's important to remember that populations benefit when there is an abundant supply of energy sources. Right. So remember, energy is like the fuel that gets you going. So basically, when there is a lot of things to eat, right, that is always going to be good for the population. Or when there's not as much predation, which means you don't have as many things out there trying to eat you, kill you, and eat you, right? So when there's a lot of food and when there's not a lot of predators, then it is good for the population, right? Because more food equals more growth, right? You have more growth to survive, then you have more growth to for the babies to survive, and so yeah, the populations will grow. Fewer predators, nothing's really taking out, the population, nothing's eating or killing the population. So yeah, it's going to keep growing. The populations are harmed when their access to energy is limited, right? So when the food runs out, basically that's what it's saying right here, is that it's not very beneficial, right? So it can harm the population. Or when there's an increased predation pressure, which means that there are a lot of predators in the area, then that is definitely not going to be very helpful for the population, right? It's going to harm them. And so less food means that the population declines, right? Or the numbers go down. And more predators, same thing, right? The more predators are out there, the smaller that population is going to get. So the less of a certain population there is going to be. And so look at the population relationships right here, right? We have rabbits, squirrels, mice. So all of these at the very bottom, the primary, then we have the producers, which are the grass. And so go ahead and just kind of look at the population relationships here and see what they are, like write them down. And remember, having to do with the producer, like the food that's available, the energy sources, and the predators that are around. All right, so now we'll talk about an ecological pyramid model. Right, so a pyramid, and we're going to see a few different models here, but a pyramid is used to illustrate the structure of the trophic levels in a food chain. Remember, trophic basically means like food or nourishment, right? So how much food there is in a food chain. And there are three types of ecological pyramids, right? There is a pyramid of numbers, the biomass pyramid, and the energy pyramid. And so here we'll start with the pyramid of numbers, right? It compares the number of organisms at each trophic level in a food chain. So typically a pyramid shaped with the largest numbers of organisms at the producer level, right? So that's why it is a pyramid, y'all, because it means the bottom has the most. And then as you go up, it starts to get smaller and smaller and smaller, right? So you see at the bottom, this is just an example right here, right? Like there are 1,000 green plants, right? So it's again numbers. And those are the producers, right? And then you go up to the consumers and 50 snails. And if you've ever had a garden before, you know how many plants those snails will eat, right? But these snails, there are 50. And then above that, the things that eat the snails, blackbirds, right? There are 20 of those blackbirds. And then hawks, which eat those blackbirds, right? Because hawks, again, are raptors, birds of prey. That means that they hunt and they eat meat, right? So those hawks, there's only one of them at the top. And that's usually what you'll see, y'all, is that the predators are a lot more, there are fewer than all of the ones that come below that, right? So that is a pyramid of numbers. And here you have pyramid, right? It shows the amount of living matter in a food chain, right? So mass just means like how much matter is in something, right? How basically on Earth you would call it the weight of something, but mass is a little bit different, right? But when you're talking about like in this case right here, we are pretty much talking about the weight. Total dry weight without water of organisms in a food chain, right? That is a biomass. And so right here you see at the very bottom the producers. Like it says there at the very bottom, there's a label. It says upright pyramid of biomass in a terrestrial ecosystem. Terrestrial just means it's on land, right? Aquatic would be in the water. Terrestrial is just on land. So here you see that the producers, the green stuff there is 1,000 grams of dry weight of green stuff, right? Plants. And then above that, you get to the herbivores, right? The consumers. And you see that again, the numbers as it goes up, they start getting smaller, right? So you start with 1,000 kilograms of plants. And then as you go up, you see right there, you have looks like a moose and a rabbit. It's only 100 kilograms there of herbivores, right? And then you get up to the carnivore, you see a wolf there, and there are only 10 kilograms of primary carnivore there in that area. And then you get to the very top, you have the top carnivore, right? And now you see a lion right there. And so it's kind of interesting to see I don't know if there's a place where you have moose and a lion in the same area, but I don't know. But yeah, at the very top, you see a carnivore, and there's only 1 kilogram right there of biomass for that area. Right. So again, at the very bottom, that's why it's a pyramid, because you have most at the bottom. And as you go up, it becomes less. Right. So 1,000 kilograms for plants, 100 kilograms for the herbivores, 10 kilograms for those primary carnivores, and then just 1 kilogram for the top carnivore. And so when you're talking about this, y'all, it's important to remember the flow of energy, right? When an organism eats, it obtains an energy. So you see that cow eating the grass, right? It's getting its energy from that grass. It then uses a lot of energy in life processes like growth and movement, right? So this cow, that's what cows do pretty much all day, is they just graze, right? They just go around eating the grass all day long because they need that energy to grow. This means that only part of their energy is available to the next organism in the food chain, right? So that's why it's like really inefficient, y'all. The higher up you go on that pyramid, like this right here, that top carnivore, it needs to eat a lot because it doesn't get a lot of energy, right? As it goes up one level and another level and another level, the energy that those things are eating, the energy levels start getting lower and lower and lower, right? So it's just not very efficient when you start getting to the top, right? Because like it says right here, this means that only part of the energy is available to the next organism, because this cow right here is already using a lot of its energy for what it did to become a cow, to live, to grow, to have babies, all of that stuff. And then when people eat beef, right, they're eating this cow, they're not getting as much energy from that beef as the cow did from the grass, right? So every time it goes up a level, there is less energy being passed along. So this energy pyramid, this illustrates the amount of energy that moves from one feeding level to another in a food chain or web. Right. So the greatest amount of energy is available at the producer level, which is the bottom. Again, that's what a pyramid is, right? The bottom is the biggest part of it. And the least amount of energy available is going to be at the top of the food chain, right? And that's why the pyramid is a top little pointy thing, because it gets smaller as it goes to the top. And so it says right here, very important, only about 10% of the trophic level's energy is transferred to the next level. Only 10%, right? So that means like 90% of it is getting wasted along the way, and it's only 10% getting moved on to the next level. And that's what you see right here. You see that the KCAL, that's just kilocalories, y'all, and that's just a measurement of energy, right? And so right here, you see those producers have 1,000 kilocalories, right, of energy. But as it goes up, it goes from 1,000 to 100, right? So those grasshoppers, or those locusts, those are eating grass, but they're only getting 10%, right, of that 1,000, and so it goes to 100. And then right there, you see those secondary consumers. They look like rats, maybe. Those guys right there only get 10 of those kilocalories, right? So right there, you see it's only 10% moving up. And then when you get to the top, the owl right there, that owl is only one, right? So it's only 10% of the energy is moving on to the next level. And that's very inefficient, right? That's not very efficient. You lose a lot of energy along the way, right? So if only 10% is going up, then that means 90% of this energy from the grass is lost right here to these grasshoppers, right? And then 90% of this energy is lost, and only 10% goes up to these rats. And then of that little bit of energy that these rats have, 90% is lost, and only 10% goes up to this owl, right? So you lose a lot of energy as you go up the energy pyramid, right? Only 10% gets passed along. And so here is an example of a question that you might see based on the STAAR Practice test, right? Based on the energy flow between trophic levels in an energy pyramid, how much energy would be expected to be found at the secondary consumer level in this pyramid, right? So again, you just got to remember that only 10% gets passed on, right? And so you kind of look at the numbers right here. And basically what is happening here is you're looking at the zeros, right? The zeros kind of every time you go up a level, one of those zeros disappears, right? So you have 3 zeros right here, but you go up to this next level, there's only 2 zeros, right? You have 2 zeros up here, but one of them goes away, and up here you only get 1 zero, right? And you move up to the next level, and this 1 zero goes away, and here you have no zeros, right? So if that helps, you can kind of do that in this one right here. So we would start right here. What does it say? The would be expected at the secondary consumer level, right? So you would be right here. And look at the zeros that are there, right? Every time you go up, just remove one of those zeros.